In today's video, we're back with some updated NHL trade rumors. I want to focus a little bit on the Edmonton Oilers and some acquisitions they may need to look at over the summer. Plus, I want to take a look at the updated TSN Trade Bait Board, recently updated here by senior writer Frank Saravalli. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. Welcome to Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. As I mentioned, I want to take a look at the updated TSN Trade Bait Board here, so this is a video you're going to want to watch all the way through. There's a lot of interesting names here that they've updated on this list here over the past couple of days, but before we jump into that, I want to take a quick look at some information I've uncovered here about the Edmonton Oilers and some moves that they might be looking to make here over the offseason. Now, of course, as we know, they have a goaltending issue in Edmonton. They do have Mikko Koskinen, who Peter Chiarelli gave a very generous contract to before being let go as the general manager of the Oilers. So I don't think he's capable, and I don't believe they think he is either, of being the main starting goaltender, with a lesser-known backup who can only play 20-25 games. I think they need to have at least a 1A, 1B situation based on what they're paying Koskinen, and I'm not sure they want him to be just a backup. But they do need another goaltender who can challenge him and certainly take up a fair bit of the start. So they are looking at a variety of experienced netminders who they could sign as free agents. Included in that list would be Brian Elliott, possibly Peter Mrazek, or even Semyon Varlamov. It is possible, though, that Mrazek could be retained by the Hurricanes. I think out of the three, that he's the most likely to stay with his current club. I do think they're quite happy and pleased with how his season went, and he was the starter during the playoffs. The other goalie they have, Curtis McElhinney, is also a free agent, but obviously Mrazek's much younger, so I do think it's possible they might try to retain both of them, but if they can only come to terms with one, I think they'll certainly try a little harder to retain Mrazek, so I think it's quite possible he might not be available come July 1, but certainly a guy like Brian Elliott or Semyon Varlamov or even Mike Smith in Calgary wouldn't completely rule that out either. I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion and he resigns with the Flames. I mean, they have some decisions to make as well. Do they go with Smith and Riddick again? Do they try to re-sign Smith for 1 or 2 more years? Or do they go a whole different route? It's certainly kind of up in the air what their plans are. But however, there are plenty of veteran goaltenders on the market who are able to be starters, at least in a 1A, 1B situation. So I'd certainly look for them to add some veteran experience in that regard. Now, it's also been known that they're looking to add some speed and skill up front. So I have seen rumors that they're interested in some of the Maple Leaf wingers. They have been linked to Connor Brown before. It was rumored that they were close to making a deal at the NHL trade deadline to acquire Connor Brown. We know the Leafs are in a tough situation with their cap situation, and there's certainly plenty of Leaf players on the updated TSN Trade Bait Board, which we'll get into here momentarily, which you will see Connor Brown's name as well as many other guys. But it's been noted here that the Oilers certainly apparently have interest in Brown as well as Kasperi Kapanen. Now, Kapanen's not a player that's been mentioned much in trade talk, but he is a pending RFA and certainly could possibly be an offer sheet target. I do think when you look at all the RFAs, like we discussed in a video in the past week here, looking at offer sheets and who might be the most likely targets, I think a guy like Kapanen would be a much more bigger target than a guy like Mitch Marner because of the compensation that he'd have to give up. Personally, I'd be shocked here if Mitch Marner signs an offer sheet. I just don't see teams willing to give up 4 first-round picks for the kind of money he's going to be looking for. I don't think there's any point in any team offering an offer sheet to Marner for less than 10.5 because I just don't see him accepting that. So it's kind of a waste of time. And really, if they want to give up 4 first-round picks, that seems a little crazy to me. I think they're more likely to target some of these mid-tier RFAs like a Kapanen. I mean, he's proven he can play with Austin Matthews, so why couldn't he play with Connor McDavid? He's got tons of speed. He can score. He's got good skill. He can also play in the PK, which is good. He's a pretty good two-way forward. I think he'd be a great compliment there. Not to say that they're going to be able to get a deal done or that they're going to definitely offer sheet him, but there apparently is interest and it's something that they're considering, and depending on who the Leafs end up moving, I can see the Oilers having talks around these two players to try to acquire one or both in a potential package deal here. I think they'd both be great fits. Obviously, Connor Brown has some past experience with McDavid and Jr., so they might look to reignite that. That would certainly be the cheaper option of the two, but he doesn't have a whole lot of term left on his deal, making just over $2 million. But either way, those are some potential deals that the Oilers are looking at. And there's also been some talk that is there any possibility that they might change their mind and actually keep Toby Reeder. Now, as we know, Reeder had a terrible year last year and didn't score any goals and certainly took a lot of flack, especially from Bob Nicholson in the media. One of those leaked reports where he basically told season ticket holders that they might have made the playoffs if he had have scored any goals and certainly capitalized on more of his chances. which he did later kind of clarify and kind of, I think, regret saying. But at the end of the day here, one thing to keep in mind is new head coach Dave Tippett was Reeder's former coach in Arizona, where he had his absolutely best years. I mean, Reeder's never been a huge player in the NHL, but his best seasons did come when he was a member of the Coyotes under coach Dave Tippett. So I just can't help but wonder if there's any influence from Tippett to possibly look at maybe retaining Reeder, maybe even if it's only on a one-year show-me type of contract. They do have a lot of decisions to make in Edmonton, and I just wonder if maybe, just maybe, they could change their mind and keep him around for one more year. But I know based on how last season went, that's certainly going to be a tough sell for many of the Oilers ownership and upper management group, including Bob Nicholson. So stay tuned on that. But either way, just something to keep in mind. Now let's take a look at the TSN Trade Bait Board, recently updated here over the weekend by TSN's senior writer Frank Saravalli. Certainly all kinds of interesting names here. Some of these we've talked about. I mainly want to focus on a lot of the defensemen. There's a lot of great left and right shot defensemen on this list that could be available for trade, many of which we have discussed at some point in time over the past couple of weeks. There are some ones on this list now that we have not talked about before. So I want to take a quick look here and show you the board and kind of see some of these top guys who might possibly on the move, so with a bit more of the focus here on the defense. As you can see, the number one player on the trade bait board right now is Penguins winger Phil Kessel, who we've talked about here at great length. Recently nixed a trade to Minnesota, and it seems abundantly clear the Penguins likely do want to trade him. It's always possible that Rutherford might change his mind and not trade Kessel if he can't get the right deal to trade him that makes sense for the Penguins, where he doesn't need his consent, because obviously there are some teams he can do that with, or if he can't find a deal that Kessel will waive to, and that makes good sense for the Penguins. They're not going to just give him away as a salary cap dump. They need to get some scoring in return as well. So we'll see about that for sure. Of course, you still see Jason Zucker at number 3. Of course, he's the guy that was rumored to be coming back from Kessel in the Minnesota-Pittsburgh trade to get nixed there. Another forward at number 6, you got Ryan Callahan of the Lightning. Obviously, the Lightning are going to be looking to clear some cap space. They got to have him make a contract ready for Braden Point here. There's rumors they might be looking at Erik Karlsson in free agency, so they're certainly going to have to clear some space. Callahan's down to 1 year left on his deal, so if they either trade him with a prospect or something as a sweetener, they might be able to move the contract completely, or they may have to retain a little bit. But either way, Ryan Callahan's fully expected to be traded this summer, and I think he will welcome the move, especially if he's going to a place where he knows he's actually going to be able to play and not be more of a spare part. Of course, you get number 7. There's a forward there, Michael Frolik. Frolik was a player who was rumored to be in that Jason Zucker deal with the Flames at the trade deadline. Explains why Zucker's so high here on the list. Obviously, there's been multiple failed attempts now by the Wild to trade him. So Frolik and I believe it was Sam Bennett were the players rumored to be going back from the Flames if that deal had gone through. So Frolik's another player that expects to be traded. And of course, Kyle Turris at number 8, another forward who we've discussed before, had a down year. He's got 5 more years at $6 million. Did have a pretty decent World Championship tournament playing for Canada, was appointed as their team captain. So that certainly was a better way for him to end the year. So you never know. I do think it's less likely Turris gets moved just because of the production that came last year with that contract might prove difficult. And of course, Connor Brown's a player that we just talked about here that I mentioned from the Leafs. And of course, former Leaf goalie, now Panther goalie James Reimer's down there at number 15 as well. Certainly highly expected the Panthers are going to make a big play for Sergei Bobrovsky in free agency. And of course, they're not going to have room for Reimer and Luongo both. So therefore, it's likely expected that Reimer is the one to go. Still has a little bit of term on his contract, and certainly the easier of the two to move here. Now, of course, the top defenseman though on the list is Jacob Trouba. Now, Jacob Trouba, the latest reports indicate on him that there is a ton of interest right now, and there's all kinds of talk with many teams expressing interest in talking trade here with the Winnipeg Jets. Personally, I still feel the top teams to look for in this regard would be the Red Wings. I think he'd be a great fit there. I think he'd be one of his preferred destinations, being a Michigan native. I'd also look for some of the teams in the New York area, including the Islanders, Rangers, and Devils will likely be in on that. They have the space, they have the assets, so the Jets will likely want. So I'd certainly keep your eyes open for them. I think that's the most likely landing spots for Jacob Trouba. Looking at some other defensemen, the next highest rated D-man would be Nikita Zaitsev, who we talked about yesterday. Obviously, it's been made public now that the Leaf Blue Liners asked for a trade for personal and private reasons. But as we know and already discussed before that, I think it's a big shocker and surprise that the Leafs were going to try to move his contract anyway. Obviously, they need to free up space for guys like Captain and Marner and things that we already touched on here. So it's not a big shocker, but that's going to be a little bit difficult and tricky to do, but I do think it's possible. There's enough teams out there that have already apparently expressed interest. So we'll see on Nikita Zaitsev. Of course, another top defender on the near high on this list here is PK Subban, who we talked about at great length before too. The Predators likely looking to shed some salary to bring in some scoring forwards, and of course $9 million on the back end. When they also have to do a big contract extension for Roman Josi, makes a lot of sense. Subban had a down year. So it makes sense that he's on this list here as well. And of course, there's Shane Gostisbehere, who would be next in line here for defenseman, who we've talked about before, and his name's been popping up here yet again. Another younger left shot D. Of course, Gostisbehere still has 4 years on his deal at $4.5 million. So I certainly see him as a potential trade bait by the Flyers. They've got a ton of young players in both forward and defense. They have a fair bit of RFAs they need to sign. I can see Gostisbehere maybe getting a fresh start somewhere else and making room here. I do think teams like, for example, the Montreal Canadiens, who are in need desperately for a top left shot D, would be a prime target for him. I also mentioned in the past maybe Nick Leddy, who was reportedly on the move but didn't make this list from the Islanders, might be a good fit for them as well. But either way, I do think there's a pretty good chance here that they would be inquiring on the cost here to acquire a player like Shane Gostisbehere. Next up for defenseman, another player who we haven't really touched on is Travis Hamonic of the Calgary Flames, who's on pending UFA, going in the final year of his deal at $3.8 million. He's certainly proven to be a pretty steady defenseman in his day here in the NHL, so certainly another player to watch out for. Now, when it comes to the Flames, I can certainly see them shaking up that decor perhaps, but I would think of maybe just as likely as Hamonic would be TJ Brodie to be moved, but that's just my gut feeling on that. But obviously they have some information to suggest that Hamonic might be the more likely one to go. Of course, you've also got Olli Määttä here of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, Jack Johnson's on this list here too. He's further down the list because of his contract. But either way, Määttä and Johnson are certainly players that the Penguins have been rumored to be looking to move here for a number of weeks and months, really since the end of the year. So we'll take a look here and see if Olli Määttä gets moved. Of course, there's Colin Miller on this list too from Vegas. Right shot defenseman, 3 years left at 3.8. We talked about the possibility before. Maybe the Leafs or, who are our team in need of a right shot D might be looking at him. Certainly would make sense as well. A lot of these guys are left shots. And of course, we skipped over Kevin Shattenkirk here. He's pretty high in the list of $6.65 million, 2 years left to go on his contract. I think he's less likely to go than many of these guys just because he's had more health issues and certainly less production. And the contract's not real favorable either. I don't see the Rangers getting away with that one without retaining a big chunk of salary or adding a nice prospect or something in there to really sweeten that deal. I think he's going to be difficult to move myself. So that is all the latest updates to the TSN Trade Bait Board. Of course, as always, I want to hear your thoughts and your opinions down below. Obviously, all kinds of great players potentially being moved this summer. Lots of speculation around many of the Canadian teams as well, including the Leafs, Oilers, Jets, Habs, to a degree. There's all kinds of talk around here, so we'll see what happens here. Let me know what you think is going to happen down in the comment section. Maybe leave some mock trades that we can discuss as well, and we'll continue the conversation in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and give the video a thumbs up as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.